a podcast where we dig deep into the life experiences of exceptional people that we've met and would like to get to know better. In this podcast, we actually have a great, fantastic guest for today. We have Anvita Jain. So Anvita is actually a really big mental health and wellness advocate, and we're going to use this podcast to learn a lot more about her background, her how she grew up, and basically what triggered her interest in mental health and advocacy. So with that, Anvita, if you want to quickly introduce yourself, that would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, awesome. So, thank you for having me too. I am an honor to be, I guess, the first guest apart from the co-host. So a bit about me or my background. I was born in India, but I grew up in Portland, Oregon. So I'm a West Coaster. And then I moved to Texas, and I've been in Texas for about a decade since I started at UT and beyond. So I guess my two homes in this country are Portland and Austin. Um, just to talk a little bit about my childhood, I grew up in a very white city. Portland's gorgeous, but it's very, very white. So I was at an interesting intersection because while that was kind of the background of like a lot of my school environment, we also were part of a close-knit Indian community there. So I kind of had like the best of both worlds, I would say. I'm not at either end of the spectrum in terms of being like super desi or super white. In terms of my interests, I'm kind of like right down the middle. I kind of pull from both, both aspects of my upbringing. Um, I was fortunate enough to do like a wide variety of activities growing up. My dad is huge into sports, so I did basically every sport that exists. And the one that I stuck with me was dance, moving forward into my adult life. But what this did to me, or did for me, I guess, in terms of doing all these activities, what is it nurtured my natural curiosity, and it fit with my like multi-passionate kind of self, and as well as strongly influenced my adult life in terms of I love trying new things, and it that's kind of how I approach wellness, self-care, and other things in my life. I remember hearing you mention that quote that's been going around Instagram on your first episode. What was it? A jack of all trades is a master of none, but always better than the master of one. That's
Yes,
I am very
yes.
passionate, and I think we'll have fun talking about that because that resonated from both of your guys' conversations. As far as like my academic background, quite varied. I studied biomedical engineering in college. Realized by the end of college that while I could do it like decently, I wasn't very passionate about it. Then I tried a job in business, working at Capital One as a financial analyst. It taught me a lot of problem solving, so it appealed to like the problem solving side of me. But oh my gosh, it's the driest stuff I've done ever in my life. Like I'm just not a finance girl, and so for me, I had a huge shift in just terms of like pursuing my passion. I'll talk more about this and later in our conversation because my mental health journey actually influenced that a lot and was kind of the trigger for that. But then in grad school, I studied HR management, which is why, hence working in HR now, and kind of took both of my backgrounds. And right now, my previous job was HR and tech, which is likely going to be where I stay for a little bit. Currently, I'm on fun employment, which I'll talk more about too. I call it unintentionally unemployed. So I actually haven't been actively looking for a job for the past 10 months. I've more or less been living off my savings and doing kind of other things and shifting my whole kind of life in some ways. But my last job was at Dell. And that was a good experience, hence being in Austin. I remember a question you asked growing up. I used to want to be a spy. Obviously, that didn't end up being what I am now, but I think at the time I wanted to be a spy because it like drew on my natural sense of curiosity and adventure, which still lives. It's just in a different form.
So we're definitely gonna dig further into that spy story. I feel like there's a real story behind that one.
I don't actually know where it originated from, but maybe your
I
questions.
have I have a guess, and my guess is maybe from like the movies like Spy Kids or something like that. I feel like that must have heavily influenced it. Then there was like Kim Possible growing out the cartoons. I'm thinking it's a blend of all that kind of stuff. There was a really big spy culture when you look at the early 2000s. That's what I think it
Yeah,
is.
that's probably it. That's actually it. I think it was Spy Kids. I think you're right. I was like trying to remember what movie. Spy Kids was it. And I think like you said, there was a spy culture back in like the early 2000s, which when I was like 6 or 7, when he hit that, like right in the, entering the teens. So
Right in your formative years.
exactly, literally in my,
So
I'm like,
what would be
hi.
very very interesting to understand is like how all the experience you experienced in your formative years followed you into your adulthood, right? Because I feel like during your formative years is when a lot of thoughts and ideas and perspectives get ingrained into your being, and then a lot of that manifests later in life.
100%. I mean, I think when the one I was talking about was like trying a lot of activities, right? I think that's one thing my parents did really well, is that they didn't force anything on us. They're kind of, but they also were like, at least try it. So there was this sense of like, even if there are things that I remember, like this one summer, my parents put me in soccer camp. Okay, soccer was the one sport I did not want to play because I knew I wasn't like a runner. I wasn't good on my feet. And so soccer was just never drew my interest as a kid. And my parents were like, well, at least try it. So I don't remember if it was a week, but oh my gosh, we were running out in the sun. I was like low-key miserable. But, obviously my parents had paid for the camp and I was going to stay at the camp. So I did it. I'm still glad I tried it, no regrets. But I think that's the one thing is, learning to try things through discomfort and learning that discomfort is part of the learning experience. And if you're not somewhat uncomfortable, you're probably not learning something, is a huge lesson that I've taken into my adulthood. Now, obviously, there's still resistance and that's, I feel like, a constant learning journey. But I think that's one kind of thing that happened in my childhood that definitely influenced, because now I still try a lot of different things. Like I said, I'm a very multi-passionate person. Um, it took a while for me to get there, like be that kind of coming to terms with being okay with having like multiple passions. Because I feel like we're raised to feel like we have to have an answer to what is your passion. One answer.
Yes,
One
I have
defined answer.
I 100% agree. The way that I always viewed it is that a lot of people, because it's simpler, they like to box people. Like this is a guy that's into, let's say, finance, or this is a girl that's into beauty. A lot of people just like to box people. And
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, sometimes you need to be boxed if you're trying to become big in a specific category. And what I've seen is, if you at least look at it from a celebrity perspective, celebrities don't become a celebrity just being known for multiple things. They become a celebrity for one thing and then they branch out. And I think
Yeah.
that actually influences society too. A lot of people, they just hone in on a single thing and like that is their passion and that's what they identify as. And
Yeah.
then you have the, I'll call it unusual people, but that's not necessarily a negative, but you have the unusual people that just want to do everything, which is very different from the vast majority of people, I think.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of it's social conditioning. And that, I think what's happening now, I think the pandemic kind of broke through that. It kind of put people in such a, what is the word we all love hearing, unprecedented, but like actually though in this case, like truly unprecedented when you're put into such circumstances that you couldn't even imagine, right? Like many of us were thrown into the pandemic, like if you would ask if there had been any change in our life, this is not what we would have said. But I think when you put people in such a uncomfortable situation, people start thinking differently. It's like forced thinking differently. They have to think differently, right? For survival, for functioning, whatever. And I think the helpful thing about that, well, how that helped was it got people thinking about the norms. How have they been living into norms, right? Because suddenly they couldn't apply those norms anymore. It wasn't the same world, and still not the same world. We're never going to go back to the same world. And I personally, while the pandemic 100% is tragic, and I would never say, I never wish it on any generation, I still think it broke us out of those patterns. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from that. Um, so that's kind of my thinking in terms of like it is the norm, and I think the cool thing is that a lot of people are breaking out of that norm in terms of like you see lifestyle influencers, right? They don't get known for one thing. They get known as a lifestyle influencer. I think that's one example
Well,
of that.
yeah,
They're
that's
getting
actually a good point. Yeah,
successful.
that's a good point. That's a way to take a one idea and branch out in so many different ways because lifestyle is so big. I mean, I would still call it one thing, right? They're known for lifestyle, but at the same time, lifestyle is so broad
Yeah.
that it can encompass so many things, whether it's travel, living luxuriously, whether it's, connecting with a lot of different people from a networking perspective. Like lifestyle in general, it's so all encompassing that it can mean whatever you want it to mean.
Yeah, and I think I've really been thinking about like the idea of influence and what it means to me. I kind of I like a lot of different things, right? Like I said, I'm a multi-passionate person, and a lot of my friends have told me to kind of experiment with content creation because like I will post on Instagram here and there, and they're kind of like, yo, you might enjoy this. And I've never really been drawn. I think the one thing that was keeping me from really going into content creation like fully and more than I was this whole idea, this piece of advice that you have to pick a niche. And I don't believe that. I feel like what you should do. And this applies to life too, right? This doesn't apply to, but just going back to like thinking about the concept of like influencing, it's like it can be what you want it to be. And I think you don't have to be like a famous or like a content creator that has a ton of followers to be influential, because true influence happens outside the social media world. I mean, I think it can happen within the social media world. That's not to knock that down. But I also think that true influence can happen with like small tasks, like small acts of kindness. And like it's energetic, whether that energy is through social media or some other medium. But I think the influence is in the small tasks and the small things that you do consistently on a daily basis, rather than some huge thing that you have to do in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of content creation, I was actually going through your IG profile and noticed you have a separate page for poems, and I just was curious, if you want to share more about that. Where do you get the inspiration for that, and how do you kind of channelize your energy there?
Yeah, I'd love to. Good eye. So poetry is definitely a passion of mine. It started back in high school when I was 16. So I was growing up, I was a very quiet kid. Like I had a lot of opinions, but I didn't voice them, or I know how to voice them. I wasn't really tapped into my voice or aware that I had these opinions until I joined the high school newspaper team, and I began writing. And writing was my first vehicle to tapping into my voice. I felt more comfortable writing than I did speaking. So for me, oddly enough, my strongest section in the newspaper was opinion editorial pieces. So fast forward, I started also writing poetry again. I kind of started writing poetry here and there, and then I lost touch with it through college, couldn't make time for it. And then I came back to it to process my emotions during the pandemic, because I couldn't go meet people in person, or like I had less vehicles to manage my emotions or process them. So then I brought poetry back, and that was like my emotional outlet, and it kind of just stuck. And then, like I said, some of my friends are encouraging me to explore content creation. And I was like, what a great way to do both. What if I just write and put it on Instagram? I'm doing content creation and I'm writing. It's like perfect. So I created that separate handle as like a way to experiment with content creation on a small scale. So like I wasn't trying to turn it into like a passive source of income. I was like, that was too much pressure. I just wanted to like see if I liked it, because I don't believe in pursuing anything that's not my passion, whether that leads to money or not. I feel like money follows passion. I'm very like spiritual that way. I feel like the money that is meant to come into your life will come into your life, and that follows energy. So I only follow things that make me passionate and that energize me. But anyways, going back to poetry was that. Now I kind of stopped. Like I haven't stopped writing poetry. I just stopped posting on Instagram because it wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. But it was a good way for me to like kind of just dive into it, create images on Canva, like just experiment creating graphics, experiment with taking photos that I like aesthetic things I want to put on Instagram. Writing short verse poetry. Historically I'd written like long verse poetry, but like I would take like notable experiences, and I have notes app on my phone, and I just put it into a stanza. Instead of like having to write some big poem, I would just follow that burst of creativity and like write it on the spot. And it was a good experiment. I learned a lot from it. I'm still, like I said, I'm still writing poetry. It's just more for myself right now. And I think it's nice to be able to like go, like I could always go back to that account and post more, It's kind of nice to kind of go in and out of like sharing and then keeping it to myself, and then whatever follows my whim at the moment.
Sure. So would you like to share the handle for the audience, that anyone that might be interested in checking it out?
Everyone wants to see the poetry I have up so far. It's called Vita's Whimsy. So VITASWIMSY.
I also want to give credit to Anvi for her Instagram handle. So I know it's a pun that you're absolutely proud of. So if you want to share the story behind that one.
Yes, it's green with Anvi. I'll let you figure out what that is a pun of. But green with and then ANVI, my name Anvi.
That's
I
awesome.
think that was absolutely clever. Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, if you have a favorite poem that you would like to read for our listeners, that would be absolutely amazing.
Oh my gosh, give me a second. I'm not very good at like remembering poems off the cuff, but
that's fine.
I can pull something up. Let's see. and just read one off my account. So the last one of my favorite ones that I wrote, because it really described like a making last year, is about hustle versus flow is what it's called. So it reads, hustle seemed like the answer to my dreams coming true until I turned on the power of flow. Hustle is everyone's best friend. Flow keeps a small circle. Hustle makes things happen. Flow attracts what's best for her. Hustle gets mad at obstacles. Flow accepts redirection with gratitude. Hustle's pride you hear about. Flow works her magic in calm silence. And
Wow.
that's what it is.
Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very well written. Yeah, and so just to plug Anvita a little bit, is she actually has a bunch of poems on that page. So if you guys are interested in poetry, you definitely want to check out her handle.
Thank you.
All right, so I actually have a very interesting question now. So I know you're really, really big on mental health and wellness, right? And we had one of the most drastic pandemics in history very, very recently. So
And
I guess the question I have for you is, what is your best advice for how people should manage mental health situations during a period where social connection is limited? And if you have any personal experience, you're more than welcome to share those as well.
yeah, I think the one skill that we sometimes forget or like aren't taught as much as humans who are built for social connection. Right? Humans are naturally wired for connection, but a key skill is learning how to self-soothe. That's that connection to self is also important. I think sometimes we forget that. We forget that, hey, I'm my own best friend, or I should be my own best friend. I should have a relationship to self outside of my relationship to others. And part of learning that is learning how to soothe yourself and how to kind of work through emotions in your own space and by yourself when maybe you can't reach out to people. So I think that would be my biggest um, recommendation, and that is a skill I worked on through the pandemic, was learning how to self-soothe, right? Sitting through, sometimes, it can be easy to want to like call a friend to vent, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes we use it to avoid our own discomfort of sitting in the emotion ourselves first and processing things within ourselves. And talking, like, you could talk to yourself. I know that sounds whack to some people, but you in fact should be having conversations with yourself. It's really it's a healthy part of building your own connection, and also just clarifying things in your head and clarifying like emotions or sources of information. I think there's an interesting dichotomy with emotions sometimes, like good and bad. And the truth is, I would recommend forming a more emotional neutrality, kind of is what I call it, where you see the value in every emotion. Grief, especially the more difficult ones, grief, anger, frustration. These emotions historically are seen as like, why? I don't want to feel these, like, why? Or if someone feels them, they think it's a bad day. But the truth is, all of these emotions have just as much information as joy, happiness, love, like the emotions that we like to feel. So developing like a neutral mindset, being able to look at and process these emotions and get the insights and the learning from them, is a super important part of life. And learning how to do that yourself is the skill of self-soothing and having techniques to calm yourself down, right? Because you're not always going to have access to someone else to help process them. So that would be
Okay,
like the
wow,
Yeah.
that is, I think, very, very well said. So thank you so much for sharing that for our listeners here. I actually did have one question based off of what you said, and you talk a lot about having the conversation with yourself, right? So I guess I was actually talking to a really fascinating person a few days ago, and what she was telling me is the whole concept of journaling. And so, do you have any thoughts of how journaling could be used in order to manage emotions or better, at least build a better relationship with emotions?
Yeah, like as a writer, I actually do journal a lot, because writing is my connection to my voice. And there's an interesting technique that a coach taught me a year ago, which is called pages like unconscious, writing an unconscious stream or subconscious stream, basically. So what you do is, it's the first thing in the morning. So oftentimes, I don't know if people know this biologically, but your anxiety is usually the highest in the morning because your brain produces the most cortisol in preparation for the day. So it's almost like preparing for like any threats or anything, because that's how our brain's wired, right? Is to keep us surviving. It's not wired for happiness, it's wired to keep us alive, which means scanning for threats, right? That negativity bias. So your anxiety, as a consequence, is often highest in the morning. So one way to channel that or other emotions that you wake up in the morning is by journaling. And doing this, like I said, first thing in the morning to like unload. And the key is that you don't think, you just write. And usually they recommend 3 pages. And because what that does is it really gets you like writing. Sometimes if we limit ourselves, we don't get all those thoughts out. I started with 3 pages to kind of push myself and learn the skill. After that, I just kind of go with what flows. And then sometimes I'll stop at 1 page or 2 pages. But journaling is a good way to prevent yourself from ruminating in things, because most things, all emotions are energy. So they're all meant to flow through you and they're all temporary. I don't know if you've heard this, but most emotions only last for like 90 seconds. That's only if you let yourself feel it. If you don't let yourself, if there's any resistance, it's going to last longer and it's going to stay in your body. So journaling really helps channel that energy out. And it's probably one of the most effective techniques I've learned to channel it.
And I can attest to that myself, because I started journaling during the pandemic too, and could have felt much better if the social connection was still there. But since that was not there, journaling was definitely a way for me to channelize my emotions.
Yeah.
I guess the other question related to that I have, so for people who, let's say, are journaling, or they probably, not everybody's a writer. What are some of the other ways would you recommend people find an outlet for expressing their emotions, or just kind of really kind of thinking it through? Things come to mind, such as exercise, or talking to people on phone. Are there any other ideas that you might
That's
have?
what I was gonna say. Working out is huge. I'm not the most regular worker outer, but I do try, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, you go to the gym, lift weights. That's a classic example of fitness. You can go take a walk. You can go do yoga. Something I've tapped trauma-informed yoga, which is really good at moving trauma out of your body. What else? Affirmations is another thing I've really tapped into, and they're very simple. They're basically simple, present-based statements about a state you want to embody. For example, I am happy, I am love. It can be as simple as that, or I am healthy. That was one I definitely used during the pandemic to combat health
Yeah.
anxiety that I'm sure a lot of us felt. So affirmation is really good, and you can do affirmations in many different. The nice thing is affirmations are really accessible. So it's like if you're having a moment that's off, and like I don't know, even if you're out, right, you can have like 5 affirmations on a notes app or something, and you can just read them to yourself.
Yeah.
Meditation.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
I actually absolutely love what you just brought up about affirmations. And
Yeah.
the reason why I absolutely loved it is because I heard something very similar from one of my cousins relatively recently, so a handful of months ago. What
Yeah.
she basically told me is that you know how you have applications on your phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people organize application into folders. So one thing you can do from an affirmation perspective is all your social apps, you write "I am connected" um, in a
Yeah.
folder. And
Oh,
if you have money management apps, you say, I aspire wealth or something like that. So basically, you can have affirmations built into the folders on your phone. And so that every single time you look at your screen, you're going
that's
to get that, that affirmation. And the whole idea is that if you see it enough, you're going to constantly build those thoughts into your subconscious, and then you'll manifest what you want.
exactly. That's exactly how affirmations are designed to work. The one key thing that I would say is a lot of people with manifestation, because that's definitely something I've been kind of delving into too in the last year or so, is a lot of people think your thoughts manifest into reality, but really what it is your beliefs. And I say that because it's very important for some people. Like I deal with a lot of like intrusive thoughts and thoughts that aren't really mine. And some voices in your head. So it's really important when you're manifesting or even using affirmations, right? Is to believe it. And sometimes it can feel uncomfortable. So the 2 things I would say with affirmations or any practice, right, going back to the different question, like consistency. It's doing it even when it feels uncomfortable. There's a lot of times where even journaling, as much of a writer as I am, feels uncomfortable because I don't want to face my thoughts. That's the truth of it, right? But I still do it in the morning. It's kind of like a muscle that you have to flex. And so
Mm-hmm.
affirmations are the same. You got to still read them. And sometimes if you don't feel like, let's say there's a huge, like, let's say you're trying to inspire wealth, right? But you don't believe in it. You're like, how do I I get wealth, Then a key trick that I use is I am starting to, and inserting the I am starting to kind of gets your brain there. It kind of makes it a little more believable to a brain that completely isn't there. And then slowly as you do it, you'll start imbibing the energy. And like I said, the key here is consistency. It's almost like the fake it till you make it actually works to some extent with affirmations and mental health wellness practices in general.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge that we've all faced during the pandemic is we were still connected to the social media. And some people will be out and about and doing all sorts of things. So we would basically get their perspectives and just start comparing at the back of our minds. As
Mm-hmm.
you said, your reality is not my reality, right? So that really kind of put a halt on a lot of progress that individuals are making on a day-to-day basis. So uh, I know social media is something that people have switched off for a little bit, if not for long during the pandemic. What's your relationship with social media? How do you use it?
I've actually historically had a very difficult relationship with social media, and it kind of got worse before it got better during the pandemic. But I deal with something called OCD. So what that can lead to is there's a lot of compulsive habits you can develop with social media. And it can feel really out of control, and it's like a mental health condition. It's like it doesn't feel like you, and you're like, why do I have the strong urge to check this? Stronger than average, quite frankly. So that OCD has made my relationship with social media very difficult. And like you said, it enhances comparison, right? I think social media is like a double-edged sword in that you can use it. The way it manifests in your life is your intention and relationship to it. And I've been forced to look at that more. So in a way, it's forced me to heal some of that OCD and heal through that and try to figure out a good way, because I see the good in social media. The way I've kind of started healing is first acknowledging where I was at, right? Acknowledging, hey, there is a compulsion that's going on. It might feel out of my control, but like in a non-judgmental way, right? Looking at it and being like, okay, this is where I am. So having a very good awareness of like where I'm at now and where do I want to be, and kind of making that shift, but like allowing time to make that shift and being like patient and compassionate with myself rather than disciplinarian. Historically, I realized that I have like a very disciplinarian voice that I've had to like reckon with, like the inner critic, whatever you want to call it. For me, I call it the inner disciplinarian because I'm very harsh, as would surprise me. But I've had to kind of change that voice in order to develop a better relationship with social media. I would say I'm kind of getting to the other side now where I'm so much better at regulating it, but it's definitely like a everyday challenge that I kind of have to reckon with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that worked really well for me is keeping in mind that any instance or any post or any reel that we come across is just an instance in somebody or snapshot in somebody's life. It's not their whole life. There's a person behind it. There's a brain behind it, thought process, and there's so much that we are not seeing that is out there. So just keeping that perspective in mind at least helped me kind of keep sane during these challenging times at least.
Yeah, and that like remembering that there's a process behind everything. I think social media is very outcome based. I think there's some influencers changing the game there where they show you like the process or they show you the difficult moments, and that's something I've tried to emulate, becoming a mental health advocate and starting to share my mental health journey. You share those sides, right? You can't talk about mental health without talking about the difficult moments. And for me, that's something I've made a point to share on social media. It's like, yes, I can share the highlights from traveling or like all the good stuff, but I'm going to share also the difficult stuff and show a glimpse of like to the tough thoughts that I'm having and tougher topics. There in 2020, there's a lot of social justice that started popping up, like content creation as well as like actions offline, right? That was a good example of people talking about, I guess, not so pretty things. I hate to say not so pretty because that so undermines what these topics are and how important they are. But it's the best way I can describe it is like people talking about significant things that actually matter, but might make people uncomfortable. Suddenly social media isn't just for comfort, and it shouldn't be. Quite frankly, because these are issues that impact real life. So I think that's a really good example of the fact that like process and difficult and like the whole kind of spectrum of life is starting to show up on social media here and there. But and it helps. So one thing I've started doing to influence my relationship with social media is tailoring my feed, right? Muting, unfollowing, whatever it is that I need to do, and centering my own needs in terms of following feed and not just, oh my gosh, like if I unfollow that person, they're not going to like me or something like that,
Yeah, as you said, it's a double-edged sword. You have to pick and choose, what you want to see. And switching gears a little bit, I noticed that you did some freelance work for an organization called Man Mukti. Would you like to share what the experience was about, and what did you learn from it? Anything you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so Man Mukti was like the first mental health advocacy nonprofit that I really worked for, and probably like the most significant work I've done to date in terms of length. And basically, what Man Mukti does is seeks to destigmatize mental health conversations in the South Asian community, which I think we can all agree is very much needed. They were kind of the first I started working with them right out of graduate school. So really, when I was starting to come to terms with like the fact that I wanted to advocate in this space.
Mm-hmm.
So they were really like the organization that helped me become the advocate that I am today. They really my experience there. I started as a partnerships chair. So what that involved was doing a lot of like collaborations with other sponsors, mental health orgs, to create content, whether that be online through the website, doing in-person events, all sorts of collaborations, and kind of working through those and doing different things there. And then I went on to like lead that team, and it taught me a lot of different skills. It also taught, and doing it during the first year of the pandemic, right? So when I actually went on to lead the team, I got promoted right before the pandemic hit. So I'd like just started to baby my team, and then suddenly it's like we're thrown into this world where these conversations are even more important. And there's a lot of people discovering that they should take care of their mental health all of a sudden. Like mental health is a thing that exists in a lot of people's lives, that they're like, what is this? I have to take care of my brain. You'd think it'd be. That's the one thing I like laugh about in mental health is like I've had people like ask me like, oh, do I need to take care of my mental health? I'm like, do you have a brain? Okay, then you have mental health, because your health, like we talk about the health of all of our other organs, and our brain is our most complex and probably key to survival, and people forget about its health. So I laugh about that, but going back to Manmukti, like leading a team through the pandemic and the world of mental health, and especially starting to have conversation about social justice issues, because social justice issues impact mental health, right? They're also mental health issues. That was a huge learning experience for me, both kind of dealing with some things, uncomfortable situations on my own, some of my own biases, sticking to those conversations as a leader, and being humble enough to learn from other people, and put my ego aside, and actually get back to like, okay, this is based on like human rights, and we have to talk about this. And it's not really about me being right or wrong or the smartest one in the room. It's about the people having their rights, right? At the end of the day, conversation is just the beginning, in terms of like, if people don't have those rights, we're not done yet, kind of thing. But that for me really shaped myself as an advocate. And right now I'm kind of been out of like advocating within orgs, and really kind of healing it within myself and making a shift there. But it was really like fulfilling work, and eventually I made the decision to leave the organization after 2 years due to just some other things that I wanted to do. But for me, like Manmukti was super formative, and it's always gonna like hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing, and we were discussing this before as well, that pandemic really forced us to think about things in a different way, look at same things from different perspectives. We were just kind of running almost before, one thing to another, and mental health was there somewhere at the back of our minds, but pandemic really brought it forth. It brought the conversation forward. So great work with Manmukti. Is this based on online or in person? Where is it? Can you share more about that?
So it's
Somebody
mostly
wants to access
online. They have a website, manmukti.org. They have everything from like stories of people dealing with various mental health challenges to resources that you can use, finding therapists, whatever you need. They have a Instagram handle at manmukti, so easy to find. And they have content creation on there based on wide variety of topics with collaborators. So they have all sorts of online resources that you can access.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, Anvita, I actually had a question to ask you. If you wanted to give advice to your 5-year-old self, what advice would you give them today?
So many things. I joke around. I was like, I feel like I'm the hero that my 5-year-old self needed now. One thing is to never abandon myself. If there's one thing I can tell my 5-year-old self, be like, never abandon yourself. There's nothing that's worth self-abandonment.
Okay.
That's
Wow,
an excellent advice.
that's very deep. Very, very deep. I feel like there
I
must
don't know if the
absolutely be a
5-year-old
story.
even.
I don't
Yeah.
know if my 5-year-old would understand. I would probably say like
Yeah,
5 years.
yeah, that's gonna say.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. So you've done a lot of things historically, and I'm sure you're doing plenty of things now. What's next for you?
Oh my gosh. Actually, isn't it interesting? This whatever 10 months of intentional unemployment has really been to redefine my idea of achievement and success. I've actually been doing less and reflecting more. I think I'm coming into another season of starting to do things. So, like, I would say the next 5 years is one. Figuring out my next career move is kind of on the horizon at this point. I'm kind of feeling that energy and ready to get back into the job search. Getting out of Austin, I've lived in two very different states, Oregon and Texas, but I'm still haven't found the place I call home. And I'm a homebody, but I haven't found the home yet. So I feel like I need to move around. Potentially looking at either Seattle or California is my next move. I'm a West Coaster at heart, so I miss that energy. I wouldn't be surprised if I end up on the West Coast. I think what else am I doing personally? I think I'm going to look at learning energy healing. So that's been something that's been super helpful for my mental journey, and I feel drawn to being a healer. So I think that's something I want to learn for myself, potentially make something out of it. I'm not sure. Coaching is also something I'm looking into, becoming a coach. So like kind of becoming a student of coaching is probably next. Shedding and grieving past limiting identities and trying on new identities. I'm definitely in a very like writing a new story kind of phase. And I think that's going to be true for the next 5 years. And just being open to new opportunities and learning how to enjoy the process and not be so like outcome focused.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of different things, but yeah, but you hold true to what you said earlier that you want to try a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I have a question related to that, Anvita, and this is probably for me personally, but maybe for people who might be listening in. So the people like yourself and myself and Ketul who like to do a lot of things often struggle with prioritization issues as well, right? So you have so many things, how do you prioritize and pick and choose what do you want to do? So just wanted to hear your thought process of how you decide to pick one thing or the other, considering both of the things are equally attractive and you want to do them right away. So what's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, I really tune into my energy here. There's certain things, as much as I want to do everything, there are definitely certain things that if I'm being completely honest with myself, stand out to me energetically. And so my body will have, and this is where like tuning into my body is very important, as I make a lot of decisions from my energetic core rather than up here. And it's a concept in energy healing. So I don't know if everyone's going to be familiar with this, but I basically energetically figure out what to prioritize because there are always one or two things that are going to make me more excited than the rest of the bunch. And also just reminding myself that like I think there's a lot of like, oh my gosh, you're like life is so short, and I hate that phrase because I feel like it's scarcity living rather than abundant living. I truly believe that like the present moment can be very expansive. And so I use that to remind myself, like, hey, you do have time. You're attracting abundance, things like affirmations like that, to kind of help myself prioritize and like, okay, I don't have to do everything this instant. And I think that's part of why multi-passionate people feel the need to do everything in the present right now, is because we feel like we're going to run out of time to do everything.
For sure. And I think hustle culture, for example, has something to do with it in some senses, if not, you know, everything. So definitely.
I think you brought up the perfect topic because I saw Anita's eyes lit up as soon as you mentioned hustler culture. So instead of asking a question, I'm gonna give the floor to Anita to talk about that.
Yeah, no, the reason I just like, let's talk about hustle culture, because the reason I quit my last job was it was basically my breakup with hustle culture is what I like to call it. And this was huge for me. I would say it was the accomplishment, for me last year was quitting that job, because Dell is the very definition of hustle culture. It's one of the big, those big companies that imbibes hustle culture on some level. And that used to be a fit for me. That's the thing. I spent my entire life learning to live hustle culture and then living it. And then the pandemic started shifting that, because I started, a lot of people, I think, yes, I felt that need of like, I want to go out and do things. And there's part of me, a huge part of me felt relieved because my life got slowed down in a way that I really needed. You know, sometimes the universe gives you what you need and not what you want. And that was it. That's what the time that the pandemic gave me to slow down and force slowing down and not having the option to go out and do a million things was exactly what I needed. And that kind of influenced. I used to see the abundance in hustle culture, and then I started seeing the limitation. That was the shift. And I realized that, hey, I don't need to hustle. I feel like we learned this conditioning of like, you have to work hard to get good things. They can't come with ease. They can't just flow into your life. And they can flow into your life. That's the thing. I mean, I don't know if you all have ever tapped into flow state, which is like what I was referencing in my poem. I love flow state. Is like the highest quality life, like highest glimpses of life. And it's like, I worked with a coach last year and she said, what if you could live your life in flow state? I was like,
Wow.
God, that would be a glorious life, wouldn't it? Like, but you can't. That's the thing. Like, once you start tapping into levels of consciousness, you can live in flow state. And flow state is based on aligned action, is what I call it. So it's not passive. I think a lot of people think flow is very passive, but the truth is that if you guys have gotten tapped into flow, you have to do something that challenges you. You can't just sit there and tap into flow. That's not like how it works, right? You have to do something that challenges you just the right amount to where you're growing and not comfortable, but you're also not like in the panic zone where you're just completely shut down. And so that was kind of what influenced. I was like, there is more than hustle. Like, I don't have to hustle to accomplish things and do the things that I like. I can do it in a way that I have a higher quality of life. And I just stopped believing that I had to climb up the corporate ladder and all these goals that I used to have that were driven by capitalism and hustle culture, right? Because, I mean, capitalism is truly what keeps you trapped in hustle culture. Like, let's just call it, right? And for me, I'm starting to see a life beyond that. And that's kind of the huge shift. And that's why I've stayed unemployed for like 10 months without job searching. I quit my job without having another job lined up. Why? Because I don't believe in hustle culture anymore. That's just like the reality. I see a life beyond hustle culture. And I feel like you can energetically attract things into your life without having to just push against the current. So that's my take on hustle culture, or rejecting hustle culture right now.
Yeah,
It's actually an amazing thought because I'm going to say what you said in my own words. And I think what you're basically saying is that when you're not focused on just putting in so much directional energy into getting something done, you're able to take a step back and refine your thoughts, get clarity of thought. And then that is actually can be so much more powerful than just putting so much energy into doing something because it allows you to refocus, reevaluate, is this actually worth pursuing? Because in some cases, the answer may be no. You may think you want something, but it's when you slow down, take a moment to self reflect, you realize maybe the reason I want this is not because of the reason I think. I want some aspects of that, but not exactly what I'm working towards.
Mm-hmm.
So allowing you to refocus and retarget your efforts, I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest benefit of moving away from hustle culture. So I'll be perfectly honest, I'm still in hustle culture state, but not entirely. So for me, the way that I do it is I like to do so many things, but at the same time, I make a conscious effort to slow down periodically just to reevaluate. And so I guess I'm in that hybrid mode. I'm not like the flow state you're talking about, but like I'm in hybrid mode. It's like hustle, take a
Yeah.
break, reevaluate, refocus, and then hustle again.
Yeah, I think it's like, it doesn't feel like hustle. You know, I think sometimes you can still do a lot of things when you're in flow. You do one thing at a time, so you can't multitask and be in flow, but you can do like one task another. You can still simultaneously work on different things like in a day. So I would say like flow state isn't necessarily different than hustle culture in that sense. I think it's like how you
Oh,
feel.
okay.
So I think hustle culture is like you feel like you're pushing against. There's a lot of hard work push. Flow is just, it moves with ease. So you could be doing the same amount of work, but it, like I said, flows. Like it just moves with ease. So if you, I mean, I would say everyone's energy works differently. A quick recommendation I would make that's been life changing for me is tapping into human design. That's one of those like psychological models that basically it helps you figure out how your energy is built, and different people's energy works different ways. So like, for example, this is human design terminology, but I'm a manifesting generator. I'm not meant to initiate things. I'm supposed to let things come, attract opportunities, and then respond to them based on my energy. So like, and some people are initiators. Some people are supposed to be the initiators. And so that pushing or starting things, directional energy works for them. So it really just depends on how your energy is built. And sometimes you can naturally tap into that. Human design has just helped me tap into that. But it's kind of the concept that you're talking about.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I never thought about it as, I almost viewed it as universal, like there's a certain way you should do things, but based on what you're describing, I guess it is very unique, very tailored to individuals. Okay.
Yep.
I guess the biggest thing is avoid burnout, which that piece I think I've been pretty good with.
I think a lot of people,
Despite all the stuff I do, I've been good at not burning out.
well,
So
that's
I
good.
must be
It
doing
probably
something right, I
means you're
guess.
doing more of the stuff that lights you up. So that's a good thing.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is gonna definitely change after the pandemic, I think it's already changing quite a bit, thanks to the technology. I don't think the linear 9 to 5 life is gonna be a norm going forward. Definitely not. We're already seeing people having multiple careers, multiple side hustles, if you still want to call it that, or things that they enjoy doing, whether it makes money for them or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just things that they really enjoy. And the pandemic really forced them to think about what matters in life.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are just going to be having multiple careers. I don't know, Ketul, if you have anything or with anything to add to that.
No, I think you said it right. I'm actually starting to steer away from even calling them hustles because it reminds you of and and I think you said an important thing about like people doing things whether it makes them money or not, right? And there's nothing wrong with monetizing something, but it should be authentic to you. And I'm
Exactly.
personally learning how to do things without feeling the need to be good at them instantly. That's definitely been a huge thing of like younger me used to be like, okay, can I be good at this? Can I make something out of this, right? Because when people ask you, you feel this pressure to like have something to show for it. And the truth is, it's your life. If you find meaning and happiness in it, then at the end of the day, you don't need to be good. And what does that even mean, right? Good for who?
Yeah, absolutely. Statistically speaking, more men struggle with mental health issues than women.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for men who are maybe listening to this podcast somewhere, and what what suggestions would you provide them?
First of all, your mental health struggles are just as valid. I feel like, one thing that I've dealt with as an advocate is like men do get left out of that conversation. And sometimes they can feel more isolated because, you don't see as many, you don't hear about as many people struggling. And I just want you to know, like, there are people who have the same struggle. You're not alone in your struggle, and your struggle is valid. At the end of the day, you know your struggle the best, and no one can tell you otherwise because you're the expert in your own experience. The other thing I would say going off of that, the validity of experience is get help. Don't be afraid. I think, the role of males and like what society has defined as like being the provider, leading in life and stuff like that, it can be very harmful in the sense that people might not try to get help or might not feel like it's okay for them to ask for help, or are they going to be less of a man if they ask for help? There's that kind of like stereotype that floats around, and I'm like, you're not if anything, you're stronger for asking for help, and you improve your wellness by asking for help, and no one can do it alone, right? We're all, it's like I said, like we said, humans are wired for connection, and that means that you should rely on help, ask for help. There's no help. Like I said, if anything, it's courageous. Whether that's a professional, whether that's your peers, whether that is any other resource that you've been pointed to, any modality, therapy, energy healing, psychiatry, whatever you need, ask for it. I think don't be afraid to ask for help.
So I believe the word for what you described there is toxic masculinity. Do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts to share about that?
Those words were failing me. I was like, there's a word for it.
Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share about toxic masculinity?
Okay, so are we broadening past the mental wellness sphere here?
I guess so, yeah. Let's hear it.
Yeah. Okay. So as a non-male, I can't speak to it directly, so I just want to acknowledge that first, as you guys probably have more experience than I do with it. I think, as someone who also advocates for women's empowerment, right? That's like my other kind of big interest. I'm very passionate about women's rights. It can be easy to just want to blame all the men of the world sometimes. Just be like, why, men are the problem and that thing. And it's a sobering reminder that toxic masculinity also hurts men. That is my biggest thing that I think has been the big thing for me, is it hurts everyone. It hurts men, it hurts women, it hurts non-gender conforming individuals, everyone across the spectrum. And it applies to every area of life, right? I talked about it in mental wellness, but it shows up in, just look at the Roe v. Wade SCOTUS ruling, which I, could have a whole other conversation about. But I think we live in a world that's over indexed on masculinity right now, masculine energy, this very like leader, and masculine energy itself is separate from being a male, but I think what's happening is, and you can describe it as yin and yang, right? So masculine and feminine energy, yin and yang, it's like the two dynamics of energy that exist in every individual. And I think what's happening is toxic masculinity is like a product of over indexing on one kind of energy instead of having an energetic balance. And so those are kind of my thoughts on toxic masculinity at a very high level.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think for the next segue, we wanted to move into the rapid fire round. So we'll ask you a series of different questions and just answer the first answer that you think is relevant for you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Go for it.
All right, so rapid fire round. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Mountains or beaches?
Beaches.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl. I am not a morning person.
I think many of us would agree with that. I completely get people that are morning people, but at the same time, it's like, why? Why do you want to wake up super
I
early?
can wake up in the morning if I have to, because some of our world is built on being a morning person, but a night owl is my preference. That's what I think the best.
All right. What's your favorite comfort food?
Momos. I love momos. Oh my God, you give me good momos.
I think we just all got hungry after hearing that one.
Yeah, and I am from North India, so I can totally relate to that.
See, it's also from North India, so it's probably that of me.
Favorite virtue in others?
Authenticity, hands. Not even just authenticity, like radical authenticity, like unapologetic yourself, and you can figure out those people. I'm telling you, when someone's like that. And man, I relate to those people. So I have such mad respect for people who can be themselves in a world that tells them not to.
You just took the words out of my mouth, because that's exactly in the first episode is the exact words I used.
Okay.
About radical.
Did you hear that?
Oh.
Yeah, I think she took inspiration from your answer.
That's fine. You can borrow it as much as you want. Biggest pet peeve?
Disrespect / someone who's condescending.
Okay. And then finally, what's your biggest accomplishment in the last 1 year?
Being intentionally unemployed for like 10 plus months.
That's a huge deal. Yeah. Kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, this is the one thing I recommend. If you ever have time to just choose not to have a job and live off your savings and just do things with your time and have your own time, do it. That's like literally why I decided to take that decision after, because I just built up savings over the pandemic. I'm like, hey, I can actually, just chill for a minute.
Yeah, and I can attest to that, because I took a sabbatical. I think a 2-year point in my career, 2.5 years, and I took 3 months off just to take a step back, to really assess what I wanted to do in my life. And I think I did nothing but read and travel, and it was just switching off from work really helped me gain perspective on what really mattered to me going forward after that.
That's point. Exactly what I've been doing.
Amazing. Ketul, any other questions on rapid fire, or is that
no? That concludes rapid fire. So thanks so much for playing, Anvita. That was absolutely brilliant, and we all got to learn a little bit more about you in terms of what you like. So now we know. Now we all know you're not a morning person. You're absolutely a night owl.
Up in the morning, you will not find a happy person. And I don't even drink coffee, so you don't even have that on your side of your
Oh yeah. Yeah, maybe we should modify that question. It's tea, coffee, or other. Because if I'm perfectly honest, I'm the exact same boat. I don't drink coffee or tea. I'm caffeine free other than soda. No, I drink soda here and there. That's the one exception.
Pepsi, all the way.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm a morning tea person, but it's not the same jolt that coffee gives you. It doesn't wake me up. I'm a slow waker upper. Like I kind of have to ease.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, I think we're getting close to the end of our conversation, but before we wrap it up, do you have any recommendations for our listeners? So it could be a book or a podcast or a TV series, movie, whatever you're watching and that you really like.
Yeah. I think it's called Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, but it is a book, but it's also an HBO show that she actually stands. And I really liked watching the show. It's broken up into 5 episodes. I mean, first of all, Brené, I don't know if you guys have heard of any of her work. She's a very famous social psychologist based in Texas. She does a lot with emotional literacy. So that's why I recommend any of her work in terms of learning how to like talk about your emotions, identify your emotions. But specifically at her latest work has been watching her talk about it with all the expressions. I just related to it a lot more than I would reading it in the book. So that would be my recommendation. It's like, it's not light watching this. I would definitely recommend that it's not one of those things you put on in the background. Like if you really want to get something out of it, you want to like listen. So that would be like the top of mind. Another book that I've been reading on and off is called Work That Matters. And it's basically about having a career that's full of multi-passionate, like built for a multi-passionate person is like not having to stay in one field your entire the woman who wrote it went through like 14 odd jobs that are not really related to each other throughout her career. And she talks about like the kind of the thread and how you kind of build a career around your passions. And so that was really cool.
Yeah, and actually, I love that because for a lot of people, they think that to be successful, it's a linear path, right? But if you look at a lot of famous people, their path to success was very non-linear. It can even manifest way later than life. Like people become extremely successful in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s. There's no time frame really.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is learning from all the experience you have and connecting those dots and then taking elements of multiple different disciplines, multiple different areas, combining it together to create something absolutely new. And I think the most famous example of that is Steve Jobs with his Stanford commencement address. If any of you guys have seen that YouTube video, he
Yeah.
talks about that intentionally. He talks about that, about how he went to school and he took, I believe it's copywriting, is that what it's called? Um, Stenography, basically the discipline which is all about cartography. That's what I think it is.
Yeah.
Cartography. One of those.
Talking about cartography. Yeah.
Yeah, basically the fancy letters that ultimately became the concept behind fonts, right? Before
Calligraphy.
calligraphy, thank you. That's
Yeah.
the word. There we go, calligraphy, right? But basically he was able to take elements of calligraphy, which he learned through a course that he took in his undergraduate program, learned about a bunch of different topics like design and marketing, all that, combined that all together in order to first find the company that is known as Apple today. So it's absolutely fascinating where he took elements of different areas of stuff he's learned over time and connected all together. So I guess what you're talking about there, just having multi passions and trying a lot of different things, and it can actually work to your benefit in the sense that you can combine elements together that maybe no one has really cohesively combined together in the past, and then accomplish or create something completely revolutionary or unique.
And from an HR perspective, right, this is a really exciting time to be in HR actually, because what's happening is a lot of unique jobs are popping up. The pandemic has completely changed the landscape of being employed. It's put a lot of power back in the employee's hands. I mean, I was part of the great resignation. There's a reason people are quitting, and it's because they're looking for something new. But also there are companies that are ahead of the curve and they're inventing these new positions, like you said, creating something new. And the likelihood of finding a position that combines multiple interests is like higher than ever. So that's the quest that I'm on, and I would recommend people just be on the lookout. You can probably find a job that you might not think you can find that actually you like not beyond just the 9 to 5 or earning income that you actually want to spend time doing.
All right, great. So it was absolutely wonderful to have you on. Everyone give @green_with_envy a follow, as well as her handle for the poem. Anvita, if you want to repeat that.
Yeah, that's Vita's Whimsies. VITASWIMSY.
Okay. And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast, like, share, and subscribe, and share with anyone you think will absolutely love this content. It was absolutely wonderful to see everyone tune into this episode. And of course, Anvita, we would love to have you again at some point. And this was a great conversation. Thank you all for listening in.
Thank you
for having
Thanks,
me.
Anvita. Take care.